we have time, and I think I'll just make time for this, I really want to talk about what's going on our Mexican border. But just to give you a hint of what the previous administration did in executing the drug war, when the Mexican parliament was asked by Vicente Fox, the president at that time, 3-4 years back, for a drug decriminalization bill. This was out of concern for the violence that was swirling and escalating out of control throughout Mexico. His parliament obliged. They put a bill under his nose, and as he's preparing to sign it, he gets a call from Washington, D.C., and moments later vetoes a bill that he had sought. A few months ago, actually in August, the Mexican parliament passes a decriminalization bill very similar to the one that Fox sought, then vetoed. Calderon, the president now, signed the bill, and it's now law. To my knowledge, to the knowledge of my colleagues in drug policy reform in the States, unless there was some quiet back channel diplomacy going on, the President of the United States did not call Mexico and in effect dictate what Mexico's policy should be. That's an extraordinary advance for us. If you can imagine this, the United States of America respecting the sovereignty of a foreign country. It's incredible. Mexico has decriminalized drugs, all drugs. Argentina, not through legislation, but rather judicial decision, likewise. Colombia, the home of Pablo Escobar, decriminalized drugs. All of this within the last 3 or 4 months. Something is afoot, and it's big. Ecuador and Brazil are poised to do the same. Now that's decriminalization, which means it's good for the user, it's good for someone who's got a problem with drugs, who needs help. No longer will we call them criminals. We might hit them with a $100 fine, for example, in my country, where marijuana has been decriminalized. But they don't get the criminal label. They don't get hooked up, put in the backseat of a police car, and driven to jail. They don't get convicted of a crime, and they don't go to prison, in some cases for extraordinary long terms for simple possession cases. The Rockefeller laws in New York are crumbling as we speak. Some of them have already bit the dust. But since the 70s, 80s, New York, the state of New York, a fairly progressive state with one of the most progressive cities in our country, has been locking people up for 15 years, 20 years, 22 years on simple possession cases. That really is coming to an end, and it's a wonderful thing. If other countries, like in Latin America, lead the way, perhaps my country will follow. Another fascinating concept when it comes to drug policy. But imagine, if you will, the relief that people, the tens of millions of people in my country who have been arrested for nonviolent drug offenses, short of trafficking, who will in fact no longer be considered criminals. That hasn't happened in my country yet. I'm predicting that it will. But it doesn't help with the two principal reasons that LEAP was formed in 2002, 2003, namely crime and violence and police corruption, and public corruption in general. Here's what's happening in Mexico. From Tijuana to Matamoros, there have been 16,000, 17,000 killings in the last 3.5 to 4 years. These are murders being committed by drug cartels. Often in their sights are rival drug cartels or snitches, informants who cross them in any fashion. The occasional, I hate the cynicism, but it's justified, the occasional honest police chief or honest lawmaker or honest mayor who doesn't cooperate with these cartels. So they get targeted and they get killed. In years past, the killing was rather clean, kind of clinical, kind of a mobster hit. You put your target on the ground on his knees and you put a 9mm slug into the back of his brain and he's gone, like that. They're not doing that these days. What they are doing is exchanging Uzi and AK-47 gunfire on the streets and dropping innocent people caught in the crossfire as well. But even more horrifically, they are decapitating their enemies. They are piling up bodies in public squares, appending to their torso a note that informs loved ones and authorities where they might be reunited with the victim's head. The head having been rolled like a bowling ball into a public gathering, into a civic event, into a restaurant, sending a message that you do not mess with the Sinaloa, the Gulf Cartel, the Arianos Brothers cartels. These cartels are engaged in the most horrific grotesqueries of violence imaginable. And people ask me, because I grew up in San Diego and spent or misspent, according to my friends, some of my time south of the border, in Tijuana and Rosarito Beach and Ensenada and San Quintin. Well, how did it get to be so violent, Norm? I was a police officer in the San Diego Police Department for 28 years. We traveled south once a year. The Mexican police officials, our counterparts, traveled north once a year. We would meet up, we would talk, we would share information guardedly because we knew that corruption existed even then within law enforcement in Mexico, and that it was rather systemic, but nothing like today. And this is why people are saying, how has it gotten to the point where so many people are dying of such monstrous means, and so many public officials succumbing to the seduction of corrupting money? Well, there's a deeper reason than just money, just greed. These cartels are offering public officials an option: plata o ploma, silver or lead. Cooperate with us and we will give you money, and we'll give you lots of it. Refuse to cooperate with us and we'll kill you. And oh, by the way, we have kidnapped your spouse and your children, and we will kill them too. The very head of the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency, reporting to Calderon's cabinet, was assassinated about a year ago in Mexico. And this is a guy who knew better than to spend 2 nights in the same bed. This guy moved around all over Mexico by plane, by helicopter, by automobile. He was smart in the ways of the cartels. He knew that he was at risk, and came home to his home base, his apartment in Mexico City, a little after midnight, and was met with a gunshot to the head by one of his own men, by the way, who had been bought off by one of the cartels. The violence is, I wish I were saying this for effect. I am not. This is an accurate, factual description of what is going on in Mexico today. But not just Mexico.